Hello again, welcome back to European Autocraft Studios 944 Turbo Restoration Project. We're in the midst of the transmission coming apart. Next week I'd like to start putting the pinion shaft back together. The only reason I'm saying that now is we tried to get every shim possible in stock, so I had them. Some we would never use, some we would just have on the shelf forever. But I wanted to have them all just in case. Well, to our local dealer here, it was almost $1,000 in shims. One shim being $50 or 40-something dollars. So what I'm going to do is we'll start putting it together, take our measurements, and see if we need to replace a shim or a snap ring to get into the tolerance that we need. If we can't get it into tolerance, I'll get the shims that we need, maybe a couple extras on either side of that just to be safe, and then we'll go on with that. But I want to put the transmission back together, even with the input shaft the way it is, until at least one day he can come up with the money we need to replace these parts the way they're supposed to be. Replace what we need to replace. If not, nothing else, we're learning here, right? So this is good. I want to get the pinion, the carrier apart. This is a non-limited slip, as you can see, open diff. I'll go over the instructions, which are really interesting, and then we'll get it all apart completely and inspect everything. But if you look at the diagram, the procedure, the first procedure is clamping it in the vise, and then two is remove the ring gear from the housing, and then the third is pull off the inner races. But as you can see, I'm doing number 3 first, and that's because I cannot fit this in my vise with the pump gear still attached. So be aware that just because these instructions are 1, 2, 3, 4, it's best to look it over real good before you start on anything, so you get an idea where they're going with this. I imagine this could be an 87 transmission without the pump, so they're doing it this way, but then they show you the carrier housing with the pump gear. Kind of interesting. So look it over real good and use common sense if you're going to do this yourself. So we looked this over and decided we're going to take this off first. It just makes sense. So it's not that difficult. There are various types of pullers. I don't have the Kuko puller that they recommend. I'd love to have them. They're really nice. But this is a universal set you can get pretty much anywhere. Amazon. These arms are a little too thick. But luckily our bearing race isn't real tight. I was able to maneuver it under and then pull it in, or lift the bearing up a little bit so I could get these to swing in. So that worked out pretty well. I have, instead of the disc that they're using, I have a socket that goes down and contacts the threaded disc on the inside where your axle flange will mount through the case. So let's go ahead and pop this off of here. You can see it's moving very easily. We'll go over, when I go to assemble all this, we'll go over the various shims that are available, because we have to determine, and there's our pump gear. Pretty simple, it just sits on there. And they use a, which at first I turned and I'm like, wow, that's awful sloppy, but it's pretty much designed that way. So you can see it has a dowel pin, just a dowel pin to keep this from turning. Once it starts turning in one direction, it's not going to be sloppy. So that's a nice gear. And the bearing. These shims, well, no shims here, it's in the case. Those shims are used for setting the backlash and preload. So once you set the pinion depth, which I'm going to show you how to do when I get all the tools, and back to that, these tools are ridiculously expensive. I was lucky to get the 385 bar. The master gauge is a little over 600 bucks, and that's to set the tool to the right depth and zero the dial indicator so we can measure the deviation. And I do want to do that. So hopefully I can get the rest of the tools next week. I bought a couple more things, but it's not enough. And then we'll put this in the case with the pinion gear set and then we can measure the backlash, how much play is in there. You know, sometimes when you accelerate and decelerate in your car, you hear a clunk clunk. That's somewhat normal, depending on how much it is. So we'll check the backlash, and then we're going to set the preload on the bearings. There should be a certain amount of torque it takes to rotate this, of course, without the pinion. So there's a lot of assembly and disassembly that has to be done, and you need the correct tools, which I don't have, which we're working on, so on and on and on. Anyways, I've gone off on that tangent. Let's come back to this. So this is pretty straightforward. Now we got the bearing, one bearing off. I don't have to take this bearing off. I might. Let's see if this will fit. I know these videos do get sort of boring after a while. Oh yeah, this will work good. We're doing the same thing over and over again, but what I want to do is have these so you can see the whole process, not just skip through it. And I know sometimes it's like, same thing, you just pull the same thing apart again, but I want it to be a learning experience as well as, oh, that's not going to work, hold on, as well as really getting stuff done. By the way, see, it's just a basic, it fits real nice in there, we just need something to push on. Not having the exact tools is really frustrating. I hope one day, over here, I hope one day we can afford to do all that. While I fumble about here. So really, these tools are so inexpensive. These puller sets are pretty cheap on Amazon, and they work pretty well. I used to have a real nice set, but that went with the other business when I sold it. I'm going to leave this bearing with the gear so I know it's that side, and this bearing will just be next to it. So this way I can clean the bearings more thoroughly and blow them all dry. Figure if we're going to disassemble it, we might as well do the whole thing. Although the pinion bearing I'm not going to touch because I know I'm going to damage that. So we don't want to do that one. We'll clean it and inspect it. If it's okay, then good. If not, then we'll worry about that later. Okay. And there's simple. All right, now we'll clamp it in the vise, like on step 1. Don't need that anymore. And let's separate the ring gear. I think this vise is from 1902. I have the soft jaws in here so I don't put any marks in it. Okay, I've got the gun. And taking them off is not too bad to use an impact. Putting it back on, we'll tighten them down. Now the ring gear has to be heated to a certain temperature so it slides over and sits flat. So when we tighten it, it's not going to be crooked. And that's to ensure that the surfaces are exactly parallel and touching and tight. And then we'll torque them. I'll have an assistant at that point to hold the table while I do the torque procedure on it. But for taking it off, we'll have to use the Mr. Big Gun. They recommend assembling these in a random pattern to tighten, I mean. So we're going to just take it off the same way. Now this should be somewhat of a press fit. Shouldn't be that tight, but we're just going to knock it down with an aluminum drift. Excuse me, and just pardon me while I just get in front of you here. And all right, aluminium drift. She's a drifter. We don't want to scar the metal by putting it at a severe angle. So just a little bit. Be patient. Okay. And there's our ring gear. Position doesn't matter where it is. Any pattern here for it's all the same. That's what I'm trying to say. You can basically put the ring gear on any position. Any position except this position. Don't do that. It won't work. And that's it. When you buy a ring and pinion, you get one of these, and you get one of these. You have to test fit everything, and measure, and it's a long process that we hope to show you. Interesting, a lot of math. All right, there is our carrier now with just the spider gears. We get to check those for tension as well. We have a dowel pin. Take the dowel pin out, we'll take the axle shaft out and take a look at that because those wear as well. Remember, all the driving force is coming from the carrier between these two gears, pushing on these gears. So there's a lot of force on this pin. So let me see, I need a dowel pin, looks like maybe 4mm. I also have this set, which I'll try to use this one. This actually has a little step in it to keep you centered while you smash the pin through. I'll try that one. Yep, nice fit. Okay, and that's just your typical split roll pin. In pretty good shape. Now I'll use this to gently tap my dowel pin out. I keep calling it a dowel pin. It's a punch, not a dowel pin. Alright, and here's our axle shaft. This gear's probably going to fall out. Okay, and this is in excellent condition. Excellent condition, that's good. These are the discs. Well, let me show you the gear out first. See, there's a big end and a small. See the small hole and a large hole. What we can do now that the axle is out is rotate these around and remove them. And these are the spider gears, and there should be, there's shims. We don't want to mix the shims up. They go with the gear. And this side. Now these shims also come in different sizes, and you want to put this together so the unit is tight but doesn't bind. That's pretty much the only spec they give you. So there's this one. And that one. So we'll keep the shim with the gear. But so far they look good. I was surprised at the input shaft to see that those teeth had some pitting. So we'll clean these up and look them over really well. At first glance they look pretty good. Then the little spider gears here. These really wouldn't get noisy. They're only really active when you're turning, or if you have a difference in speed between the left and right rear wheel. Otherwise, they're just in the same position moving. So very little movement in there. So if you had pitting, you probably wouldn't even hear it. What you do hear, though, is the bearings. When the bearings fail, you'll get a consistent hum while driving. Make sure it's not just a wheel bearing. But that's common too. So that's it. There's our carrier housing. We'll get all this cleaned up and reassembled and check for any play. Yeah, we'll just check for any play in it and get that reassembled, and that's it. So let me get cleaned up here. We'll be right back. All right, we're back. All cleaned up. Everything looks really good. We're looking at the surfaces inside here where the thrust bearings make contact. They're all in good shape, both sides. Even the conical side where the little side gears go in look really good. If you can see in there. I believe the only shims available are for the larger gears because the distance in is going to make them tight. I'm not sure these are available. I never really tried to look. I've never had one that was failed. So I'm going to look into that. But this looks really good. Carrier housing is in good shape. I think what I'd like to do is try to buy a limited slip center section just so I can take it apart and show you how it works. It's unfortunate that's all we have is a conventional. It's still interesting how it works, but it kind of, you've probably seen this stuff before. But I would like to get a limited slip apart and see and check the wear on one of those. So I might try to do that. Very possible next week might have some really good news. I'm not sure yet. We hope to hear something this weekend, and I'll pass it on to you next weekend. But until then, keep guessing. It'll be a lot of fun. But I think something good's going to happen next week. But on that note, let's keep going. Actually, get off of that note and go on to another note. Ring gear. Quick inspection of the ring gear. I don't see any pitting or any severe wear. If you look at the pattern on all these teeth, it's magnificent. I wouldn't change a thing with pinion depth. But we will explore that and see how that all works inside there with a 12mm offset. So the ring gear looks great. We'll put that on next week. Our spider gears, our side gears, all look in really nice shape. Again, these don't do a whole lot. They play a very important role inside this differential, but they're not very active. So these are in really good shape. We did just lay them out to where they belong. I like to put things back where they go. In some cases, it doesn't really matter a whole lot, but we try to do that whenever possible. But yeah, they're in really good shape. And the larger spider gears, these attach to the axle that drive the wheels, and a little flange just goes in. This goes into the housing, and that mounts in there. This stub axle goes in there with the bolt, and that goes, oh, actually it goes this way and holds it in this way. Gotta get that right. So the stub axle will go into here, and then the bolt will hold this into the whole assembly. That makes it all nice and tight. It's important to get the procedure down there. But these look good. I think we're in good shape. I'd like to assemble this next week and see how tight this is, if it's all in good shape. Actually, what we'll do too is measure the thickness of these gears. Yeah, this shim is thicker than this one. So we'll do some measuring too to see what we have when we put it in. And that's it. This will go together next week. I want to start assembling the pinion shaft next week. We'll inspect the bearing on that because I'm not taking it off unless it's really bad, which I don't think it is. We'll also look at the bearing race, because if the race is bad, we have to change the bearing anyways. That's it for this week. We're trying to get better videos. We have a lot going on in the shop, so preparation's been a little bit lagging. Please stick with us. Sorry about that. We're in a big change coming, I think. So we'll talk to you about that next week. Thanks for watching, and just do the subscribing and liking. It's doing great. We're getting some traction on the GoFundMe to get this body work done on this car, and thank you everybody for that. And yeah, we're just going to keep it going, and we'll talk to you next week. Thanks.